Hi there. Welcome to another edition of Wednesday's Word. Today, I want to talk to us a little bit about stress. The month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And as we are currently in the middle of a pandemic, many of us may be dealing with stress. We may be feeling anxiety, maybe even some depression and some uncertainty and some doubt about the future. And so, as we think about our mental well being and we understand stress and how it plays a role in our lives, we can then begin to understand the different things that we can do to alleviate some of the stress and address the stress that we may be dealing with right now. For a definition, let's define stress. Stress is a mental and physical response to an external pressure. And dare we not say that during this particular time, during a pandemic, during COVID 19, that we may be experiencing a great deal of external pressure. Challenges with helping kids to be able to do their work, challenges with being able to balance work, or maybe even economically, financially. How are we going to make ends meet? Will our jobs remain in place? Will our loved ones become sick? What will happen to us in the future? Will this go away? Will there be a cure? Will there be a vaccination? So naturally, we'll begin to experience a great deal of external pressure. And that external pressure can result in the stress that we feel in our bodies and in our mental well being. I want you to think about stress as a stoplight, traffic light, if you will. When you reach a traffic light, it tells you a number of different things because stress can both be positive and negative. Positive stress can motivate us to do things that we would normally do that are healthy for us, can motivate us to take a different approach or different perspective. But then it can also be dangerous for us. So if I'm looking at a traffic light and the light is green, that's go. So if I think about my stress level in that situation, it can be positive stress. It can be the stress of taking on a new job and being excited about that new job. But then when the light turns yellow, then there's a caution. And so my stress level, as it increases, I may begin to feel tension in my body and have headaches or soreness or additional fatigue. I may have difficulty sleeping, may not be eating appropriately. And then if the light turns red, then that means stop. My stress level can reach a point where I'm completely overwhelmed. It's hard to move forward in any responsibilities that I have. Physically, my body could be taking enormous pressure. I could start to experience high blood pressure or diabetes or heart disease. All of these things are related to stress. And so my body becomes overwhelmed with the stress. So then how do we go about addressing stress in our body? Two ways, two things I want you to think about. The first one is nourishing ourselves. How do I nourish my body, my mind, and my spirit? Now, when I talk about nourishing our body, we are told that we have one temple, that God has given us a temple and that we are to take care of this temple. And so physically, am I taking good care of my body? Am I nourishing my body? Am I practicing good self-care? Am I making sure that I'm taking time to relax or taking time to rest? Several times in the gospel, Jesus tells the disciples to come to the side with him and to go away for a while so they can rest. So rest is very important. Eating healthy is very important, and getting exercise. And in the current situation where we are sheltering in place, getting exercise is equally important as we may not be as active as we normally are. So I have to nourish my body. The next thing I want to do is I want to nourish my mind. What am I doing to help my mind to continue to grow? For some of us, we may do puzzles, or we may play certain games, or we may read books, or we may do different things to engage our mind. But how am I nourishing my mind to keep my mind healthy? There are some things that may not be as healthy for us from a mindfulness standpoint. We may be digesting too much news or too much negative social media or negative information that keeps our mind ruminating on things that are not healthy for us. The third thing that I want to nourish is nourish myself spiritually. In this time, am I spending time with the Lord? Do I have devotional time? Am I spending time studying his word or spending time in prayer? Am I spending time growing spiritually to nourish myself in this particular time? And so nourishing ourselves becomes essentially important. So the other thing is to evaluate. The other thing I can do with my stress is I can begin to evaluate my priorities. Do I have certain things that I have determined to be very important that maybe are not as important as I think they are? Are my priorities correctly aligned? And maybe because we're in the midst of a pandemic, maybe my priorities have to shift a little bit in order to accommodate where I'm at currently in my life. The second thing under evaluate is our perspective. Evaluate our perspective. So here's what's interesting. You heard me say that stress is based on an external pressure. Now, all of us encounter external events. When those external events occur, then we interpret those events. And based on our interpretation of those events, then our behaviors will follow. So while we can't control events, we can control the interpretation of them. So my second point on to evaluate is our perspective. We have to evaluate our perspective. Listen to what Philippians says. Philippians 4:8-9 says this. It says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any more excellence, and if there is any praise, dwell on these things. Here, the writer, who is Paul the Apostle, who writes this at a time when he's actually imprisoned, encourages them to have the correct perspective and outlook. They couldn't change the events that were happening around them. They couldn't control them. The thing that they could control was where they set their minds and the perspective that they hold. And so one of the things that we can do, especially in the midst of the challenging times we're in, is we can evaluate my perspective. Am I looking and considering my life and the things that are happening around me through the lens of Scripture? Am I considering what God would have me to do and how God would have me to respond? And most importantly, if we think about what Paul says here, he says, set your mind on these positive things about who God is and about God's ability to overcome all of our circumstances. My friend, stress is a reality that we all may be dealing with and we may continue to deal with for quite some time. And the times certainly make it even more challenging for us to deal with stress. But we certainly have a God who is able to give us exactly what we need to be able to endure these stressful times and still come out triumphantly. So think about it. We nourish ourselves, nourish our mind, body, and spirit. And then we take time to evaluate our priorities and our perspective. We allow God to begin to change and to do a great work in us, even in the midst of stressful times. Pray that this has been helpful for you. God bless you. We'll see you next time.